Well, hello and welcome to the Rugby Ruckus Tight 5. Normally the Tight 5 live, not today, more because we haven't had the chance to review what was an awful result for Australia in Bledisloe 3. We've actually been accused by some of our Kiwi listeners of dodging the issue of not getting into the game. I can assure you that wasn't the case. We always get into the games, rain, hail or shine. Couldn't get to it till this week, so we decided to delay a little bit later in the week till the teams came out. But Morgs, first up, have you recovered, mate, after what was a Bledisloe bashing?
Well, I did spend 36 hours in the fetal position, but after that I realised it was Spring Carnival week, Benny. We got through Derby Day and we had to get through Cup Day and today's Oaks Day. So I suppose we've got an excuse that we had other things to do, but the world of rugby doesn't stop for anyone. So at least I've had things to focus on apart from rugby. But now we get another test against, you guessed it, the All Blacks again this week. So important to see what we can learn from the week before and if and how we can turn it around.
Mate, importantly, you mentioned the racing. I hope for those of you who are subscribers, you took my tip from our exclusive subscriber podcast last week. I tipped Colette in the Eagle, and it got up there, pal. So I had a good win on that last week. Look, what are we going to get into today? I'll just throw up quickly for those watching on video. We're going to talk about the Bledisloe bashing first and foremost, go through what happened in that game. Morgs has got a coach's corner out of that. He's got a play that he wants to look at to understand exactly what was going on in that game. And as always, I think, Morgs, you've always got some points in what's fixable, I hope, for the Wallabies teams. We'll then go through the Wallabies team for this weekend, and there is certainly some talking points in that, probably some turkey points in there as well if we're not careful. And the All Blacks team as well. They've named a very different team with a number of debutants and a number of key changes as well. And we've got the Triple Q, the quick quarantine questions with Noah Lolesio to finish us off. Now, that one in particular, I wanted to make sure we got in there because he had a tough debut, the kid, but I hope he's coming back from that, and I hope we're going to see him get on the field this weekend, albeit off the bench. Before we do that, though, quickly, Morgs, of course, let me just throw a quick promotion in for the rugbyruckus.com shop. I've put up the You Need a Body of Work shirt. We absolutely need to see some of these Wallabies get a body of work together, Morgs. You always talk about seeing players get together that body of work over time. We want to see more of that from them this weekend. And finally, of course, the rugbyruckus.com newsletter. I promote it every week. The numbers have been growing exponentially. We love putting it together each week. We love hearing some feedback from some of those people who've signed up. I'll quickly run across the bottom of our video screen some of the names of the top supporters that we have, and we really do appreciate their support. But Morgs, last week I analysed a big week on and off the field. You analysed the Bledisloe. We even had some reader analysis from Connor Madigan, one of our readers, on why the All Blacks aren't as strong as they have been in the past, which didn't look great on Saturday, but he had some really good points in that. News headlines wrapped up as usual, and rumours of the week. And there's our second group of super supporters as well, also up on our video screen. So thanks to those guys. Morgs, it was not by any means a game that we wanted to see. It was not by any means a game that put a lot of faith in the Wallabies squad and the way that Dave Rennie's coming together. Dave Rennie's comments afterwards talked about we're 5 or 6 weeks into a 4-year campaign. May well be the case, but I think Wallabies fans are a bit sick and tired of hearing that over the last probably 18 years about how they're building towards something. As accurate as it may be, Morgs, what did you think of the Wallabies' performance overall, mate? How disappointed should we be?
Oh, we should be very disappointed with the result and things like that, but there are mitigating circumstances to all those sorts of things. And Dave Rennie, he is 5 or 6 weeks into a 4-year campaign, but as you mentioned, Wallaby supporters are 18 years into a 5-year plan. Seems like we've had 4-year, 4-year cycles or whatever for a decade and a half. So you can understand that the patience of the Wallaby supporter is a lot less than that of the new coach coming in. In saying that, at the end of a World Cup cycle, when players migrate out of the system that we have here in Australia and these young kids come in, we probably didn't manage that transition very well. And added onto that were players like the Adam Colemans, the Isaac Rodders, guys like that, who we would not have assumed wouldn't be here. And then also we pay the price for I suppose, a mini generation of players of the ilk of a Jake McIntyre and a Sam Green, who should right now, for example, be pushing through into a Wallaby squad. But when positions were occupied by the Foleys and Coopers and Christian Lealifanas, which is fine, those guys weren't held in that second tier of 10s and given opportunity. A Mac Mason, this is now when we should have seen a Mac Mason in the Wallaby squad, not guys that have been thrown in first year. Will Harrison and Noah Lolesio more talented than Mac Mason? Probably not at the same stage of their development. So as almost an accident of timing, these guys are being thrust through when we've lost, say, three of the four core Super Rugby teams previous to this year lost their mainstay number 10s. Obviously, Quade had come in and out, and Christian had those bits and pieces. But we just haven't managed the transition and the succession planning of our lists at Super Rugby level, and that's why these guys get thrown into the Wallabies. And it is exciting to get young, new players who are obviously highly talented. But on the weekend, we saw the difference between seasoned professionals and young, talented players.
But I think that's probably the key point for me. And like, if you want to talk about mitigating circumstances for Australia, and it's disappointing to do it because we want to see better than what we saw. I saw Jeff Wilson, I think, on Sky Sports NZ saying they had no pride in the jersey. I don't believe that at all. I think this was just a team that really just got a touch up. The All Blacks got everything right. And I think it all comes around that 10 jersey for me. We lost before the game. We lost two of our most senior guys who would have been the first and second pick for that 10 jersey. We lost Matt Tamua for some time. We lost James O'Connor for clearly now a couple of games. He's not being picked for this weekend. So we lost a couple of critical guys in a team made up of some young guys and some older guys. We picked a rookie 10 and a rookie 12, and they were up against two extremely polished number 10s, two of the best in the world, in Barrett and Mo'unga. And we had a wet, slippery night. And what we saw a game which was absolutely beautifully controlled by both Mo'unga and Barrett. The way they moved around the park off the back of their forward dominance, the use of the boot, they absolutely just played the game beautifully, the way you want to see a game managed at international test level. And we saw a rookie team that didn't do that. We saw signs in Bledisloe too that the kicking game under pressure was a problem, even with James O'Connor there. Then we put a young bloke in there, Simone alongside, and they just didn't handle it. How important, Morgs, is that? And not to put all the pressure on Lolesio, but look, that's the position he's going to play. That's the position, he's going to be blooded in. He's going to have to get better at over time to be a test player. But how much of it do you think was that 10, rookie 10 versus two guys who were, sitting in a very comfortable position in a great team?
Yeah, well, we had a little bit of issues sort of at set piece and some of our multi-phase play, which makes it harder for a 10. In the end, we need a 10 to direct us around the park. And also, you look at O'Connor, say in the first game, he had Tamura on his outside as well. So that 10-12 partnership is an important one to complement each other. Look, there's a decent amount of responsibility there at number 10. The truth of the matter is Australia does not play well on the wet. They haven't played well on the wet for 20-odd years. We don't like doing it. Doesn't suit the way we try and play the game. And the weekend showed, when commentators and supporters are bemoaning the fact that the Wallabies are kicking the ball too much, and they kicked it half as much as the All Blacks. I think we've said ad nauseum on this show that it's not the amount of kicking, it's the manner, it's the when, it's the why, it's the how. And we'll talk about it in a second, and we'll see some footage probably. But it's very much about how that kicking opportunity is managed in the conditions, and the Wallabies did that really poorly. And then after the elastic's been broken on the scoreboard, you were forced to chase the game in the second half, which makes it even worse. It makes it even worse when you're trying to, yes, we forced offloads in the first half, but we almost had to double down trying to come back from 26-0. So it made it look even worse.
Yeah. And I think probably the one decision that I saw that was a real concern for me, and I saw it talked about it a bit afterwards, was the placement of Lolesio at fullback from the kickoff. So in the defensive line, he wasn't there. And this is a kid who, as far as I'm aware, hasn't played fullback. I don't know his background, but he certainly hasn't played it for the Brumbies. But so all of a sudden, I'm really interested, Morgan, in your thoughts on what that does to the psyche of a player, because there's a couple of things in here for me. When you bring in a guy as 5'8", and you said him, but you're not going to defend at 5'8", I immediately think that's a shot to the guy's psyche. I don't care who you are, but I think that's immediately saying, we don't think you're up to a part of this game. We're going to hide you. Now, that happens in footy, it does, but when you're a young bloke coming in, I'm concerned about that, because to flip it the other way a little bit, I was looking at it going, why on earth is he kicking for the line? Why is Lolesio kicking for the line when we've got guys with a bigger boot, when we've got guys who could get more yards? Why is he doing the line kicks? And I thought, well, maybe that's because that's part of the 5'8" responsibilities, and they want him to control that part of the game. But if that's the case, why hide him? That seemed very strange to me, Morgs, particularly when you come up against such a well-drilled All Black side who's going to look to unpick you. Any changes you make in where players move are going to be hard to get used to at any sort of speed. And if that's your debut, that's not what you want happening to yourself, surely.
Well, truthfully, Benny, I think there's a little bit of hyperbole there from you, and I wouldn't mind you getting out the bullshit meter.
Whoa!
Do you want to get it out?
No, I'm not getting it out. And see, so
So explain to me where Noah Lolesio was playing fullback. He didn't play fullback on first phase.
So when you tell me what you saw, because what I saw, and I'm sitting in the stands here, up in the stands watching, and I saw him in the back of the field many times when the All Blacks had the ball. So he's back in. He's playing back in the field.
Winger. He played blind winger off lineouts.
Yeah,
and he defended mostly in the front line off scrum when he had to,
right.
And on kicks and kick returns, he stayed in the backfield as all tens do. He spent a similar amount of time in the backfield to a Bernard Foley or a James O'Connor, slightly more because he played blind winger. He did not defend at fullback ever.
Okay.
So you know,
you just got caught in that blind winger position. Okay, you got me on some semantics there, mate. I apologise for using the full.
And then so at the start of the game, the start of the show, you said, you know, he has to have responsibility for kicking because he's 10. Well, is he responsible for kicking or not? If you're responsible for kicking, then you kick for the line. Reece Hodge wasn't out there, who was probably the one with the significant difference in kick length. Banks is probably second. He wasn't out there. And Haylett Petty, geez, if he kicks it 2 meters further, I'll give you that. So let's not.
I've got that.
Let's not let the truth get in the way of your blow up. But in saying that, they hit him on the blind wing in the line-out, and it's what they've done with many tens previously under Nathan Gray as a defensive coach. Previously, they'd often put Bernard Foley or the Wallaby 10 in the tram tracks. Very similar way of doing it there. A lot of it was about getting a bit more starch. Did you notice where Richie Mo'unga was defending off some scrums?
Richie Mo'unga does go back as well.
He was defending at 13.
Was he?
Yeah. So do you think that? So when Ian Foster says to Richie Mo'unga, Richie, a bit like you do at the Crusaders, we're going to defend you at 13. Did it look like it had to put a hit into his confidence? Because he looked pretty. he looked pretty confident to me. So look, yeah, we can try and overanalyze it. Look, Noah didn't play well. This was a huge step up for Noah. He was on debut against a brilliant All Blacks team in great conditions that his Wallaby counterparts and himself didn't handle well. He didn't do particularly well defensively or in terms of covering space in the back three, but neither did the other back three as well. What New Zealand did really well, and I'll preface a little bit of what we're going to talk about in Coach's Corner, but what they did really well was kick long and to corners, and they kicked crossfield kicks to wingers, including especially Geordie Barrett, and also, you know, I think we said in the newsletter, Benny, that if Dane Coles is roving out wide, I was obviously on the sideline with Network 10. He was out in the tram tracks waiting for cross kicks. That's how much fun he was having. So what they did was they did cross kicks early, they kicked long early, and then what happened? Geez, there you go. Look, you could have got a better photo, surely.
I was ready for you.
Yeah,
That's a picture of Morg still on the Shell 10 side. I thought we'd give it a mention. There you go.
Yeah, nice.
Rattled you.
Yeah, that was good. I lost my train of thought now. I was bedazzled by myself.
You were talking about, in the newsletter, you said Dane Coles was out in the 15s, right?
So what they did was they manipulated the space in the backfield excellently well. And they did it too good. They were too good for Korobidi, Dalguni, Haylett Petty, and Lolesio there. It wasn't just him alone. So what happened by the time, the back end of this first half, when they really capitalised on some of their short kicking game, was because they'd pushed the backfield right back to try and cover the spaces, and they'd pushed the wingers wide to cover the cross kicks.
So it's a bit of rope-a-dope, mate.
Mate, it was just, you know what it is? It was just manipulation. You play shallow, we kick long. You tighten up, we'll kick to the cross kicks. And they were calling it and standing there consistently. Obviously, it's easier for me being able to see the whole field down at ground level, but I really noticed that. And Mo'unga obviously defending at 13. That was also about them manipulating the field so you have a bit of starch in the 10-12 channel, and it leaves your back three with that continuity that they normally do. So I would say the All Blacks managed the way they moved their defensive team around as well. And also the situations that Noah Lolesio individually found himself in the back end of the first half were very much because of the wonderful manipulation of spaces and use of kicking game by the All Blacks. So I don't think we just go, Noah, you shouldn't be in the backfield, you're rubbish. I think they were just too good for us collectively.
Mate, you should. Yeah, well, I think that's the point too, is that you talk about the way they manipulated us around the game with the kicking game. They could do that as well because they were winning the physical battle too. I mean, I saw a couple of different stories written giving ratings to the Wallabies, and no one got above about a 5.5, and that was probably about right. There wasn't anyone you could look at in that game, a runner here from Pattaya, there from Pattaya, but there wasn't really anyone you could look at and go, they had a good game. They had an influential game. It was all about the All Blacks doing almost what they wanted to start to finish, and for a while there I thought it was going to blow out. they come out after halftime and kept it there. And I was pleased to see Dave Rennie kept the faith with Lolesio and Simone and a few others at halftime, because you don't want a debut where you get hooked at halftime. You want to say, right, it's a baptism of fire, but have a go. They had a good 20-minute period there where they were in it. They scored a try, but really everything got unpicked. How much more do you think that could start to get unpicked from things like, a few of those in the first 10 or 15 minutes, Dangunu takes the legs out, gets a yellow card. And I think that was a fair yellow card. Sam Kane probably should have got one too, because he came through and took the legs out at the same time on his own player. But, how much does it rattle a team when they try a few things early in the wet, doesn't come off? They look like they were pushing passes a bit much and they just couldn't recover from that.
It was a lot of things. It's interesting that the noises coming out of the Wallaby camp through the week was about accuracy and precision, and it was about a much better proactive kicking game. And there, funnily enough, they identified exactly what they needed to do. They just weren't good enough or couldn't keep their composure and do it out on the field. And that's partly their own fault and partly the great pressure that the All Blacks were able to put them under. There was a lot of panic very early. The offloads out wide, getting tackled into touch when you should be stepping off your outside foot. A bit of pragmatism with the conditions and not pushing short passes and being aware of that, and then proactively kicking the ball. So there were lots of little things that added up to the fact that the Wallabies were doing almost the opposite of what they definitely needed to do in the first 20 to 30 minutes of a Bledisloe game in the wet. When you know that the key with the All Blacks is to not let them break the elastic, not let them turn it into a game of touch footy, super rugby almost, where a guy like Richie Mo'unga looks really comfortable. You want pressure. You want to be able to make it some sort of arm wrestle for a while just to keep the teams close together. And what was happening at halftime, the All Blacks, they were breathing pretty easily with it. They put 26 points on in 40 minutes. So in terms of how you start, they would have talked all week about, okay, we're going to kick to Caleb Clark, we're going to tackle him, we're going to put him on the ground. And, in the first couple of minutes, straight away, bang, there's a lack of discipline. Then they're just on the back foot from there and probably never arrested that momentum.
Yeah, and a couple of times it looked like their heads were down, and it just looked like they weren't. Their line wasn't, intact. It didn't show any sort of pressure. It didn't really get into it too much. Morgs, let's go to Coach's Corner, because I think what we'll do is we'll then bleed into about the Wallabies and All Blacks team for this week, coming off some of what we saw last week. So Coach's Corner, I'll get the clip up. You tell me what you're going to show me.
Yes, obviously we've referenced some of the kicking and the varied kicking that the All Blacks came up with. This was really an illustration of, one, exactly where the Wallabies need to get to when you're going to be playing 4 weekends of Test rugby in November, year in, year out, once we get back to normalcy. When you're going to be playing rugby championships in the wet in New Zealand, and you're going to need to go there at some stage and win a game to win a Bledisloe or to keep Bledisloes alive. If you come across wet tracks, wherever it is, you need to be able to, one, be set up to oblige the opposition to cover lots and lots of spaces in depth and width on the field, which is not something we did well enough. I referenced the cross kicks. I referenced kicking deep. So what, in terms of context, this is the back end of the half. The All Blacks had kicked a lot. They'd kicked long. They'd kicked contestable. They'd kicked cross kicks. And what happens here is the Wallabies turn the ball over. Yep.
Right. So there was a bomb downfield.
Yeah.
That Lolesio drops. I'll just move through that, and I'll get us down to here. There's a turnover.
So if you play it from here, so the Wallabies go right. So you see here, Haylett-Petty, Daugunu, Pattaya, and Nick White are all engaged in this attack, and Noah Lolesio here is at 10. The ball gets turned over, and Noah Lolesio, as a 10 should do, when, if you pause it there, Benny. Okay, so right now, occupied around the ball and on the blind side are Haylett-Petty, Daugunu, Jordan Pattaya makes the tackle, and Nick White is there. Okay, so Noah Lolesio does what he has to do. He drops into the backfield to cover because he sees his right winger and his fullback and his 9 are all in that occupied in that defensive line, and Korobedi's on the far left wing. So he goes back, which is exactly what he needs to do as a covering 10. Doesn't mean he's playing fullback. We play it on. What the Wallabies really need to do here is to try and get some of these backs to get away from being jammed in here. Nick White needs to try and get out of this defensive line into the covering role. And look where they go. They see Nick White has been engaged in that defensive one, and they go exactly where a 9 should cover. That's as simple as what that play is. They saw that Nick White was caught 3 phases in a row in the defensive line on the blind side. There is no chip cover. If you look in behind here, that's exactly where the space is. You guarantee it's Mo'unga that calls this, not Barrett that does it off his own bat. And then that's it. With the Wallabies having so many of their backs engaged and important outside backs engaged in the far 15, that's as simple as that play is. That play is Richie Mo'unga and Beauden Barrett communicating with each other to identify the space. On the back of that is an excellently executed kick, a good kick chase, and that's it. And you look at the way that Marika Koroibete and Noah Lolesio, if you want to have another quick look at it, in terms of managing a line break when you're in trouble, those two don't talk to each other. So you can if you push it through and we see the chip, you see how we've talked about Barrett and Mo'unga working together. Watch Marika and Noah work independently of each other. They almost cross. Marika covers across to go after Mo'unga, and Noah goes the other way. So when you're breached, it's really important the guys in the backfield to work together. Now, that points to the inexperience to a certain degree of Noah Lolesio in the backfield, but knowing that as a 10, you spend a lot of time. Right here, Noah's got to either call Marika out and say, I've got Richie, or go the other way with him. Here he takes no one. Look, they crisscross here when they should be trying to pick up one each and close it down.
Yeah. But it wasn't good. It really put a dagger into the Wallabies at that stage. And I just have a little bit of sour grapes to get us through the moment. And apologies to the Kiwis before I do that. But if you watch this play again, you just watch Goodhue comes through and absolutely takes out Lolesio trying to catch the ball. He's nowhere near the ball, Goodhue. Absolutely wipes out Lolesio's attempt to take it, makes no attempt to catch the ball. That's not called. And if you roll it on here, watch our old mate Sam Cane go straight in the side and get on the ball, slow it down, and there's no penalty there. That's the referee's eyes looking at the ball there. No calls. Anyway,
and then Whitelock in an offside position taking out the 9. Anyway,
that's right. That's right.
What I really wanted to illustrate there was, that is a brilliant test try, but it is almost maddeningly simple. They saw that some of the people that are charged with occupying spaces and defending spaces, especially off turnover and in backfield, were involved in the play, stuck on the blind side, and they kicked the ball to that space. And from there, their individual skills and ability there was able to finish off the line break. So, we want to congratulate the All Blacks for just an excellently played game in the wet. They were far too superior. But there's lots of basic things the Wallabies can take out of that and say, yeah, well, we need to do exactly the same. And 2, if we can defend, I think Bledisloe 1, we talked about defending efficiently, Benny. Bledisloe 2, we talked about defending efficiently. There, they needed to find a way to get Nick White back out of that. So you see a first-up missed tackle means Nick White has to make a covering tackle as opposed to being able to drop back into that covering line to watch for the chip. All those things add up into tries and line breaks.
Mate, and I hate to push it again, but in our newsletter, you make these points. And for those of you who want to read great insight from Morgs ahead of the games, get the newsletter, because Morgs made exactly this point about those first-up tackles and the impact it has on creating those issues afterwards. I think one of the things that I take from what you said there, Morgs, which is really, really key too, is how constructed that was by the All Blacks over time, that try. The way they'd moved the Wallabies around during the game, and then they've created that opportunity, which actually is interesting because I found out on Twitter and I went and watched Nick White's halftime interview as he left the field on Fox Sports, and he just said he was clearly quite frustrated, and he said something along the lines of, "It's all our own mistakes, full credit to them, whatever, but they're not doing a lot." And it was quite it's the kind of things you feel as a fan, but then when you stop and look and you go through it like this, you think, well, mate, no, they pushed you around the park and created that opportunity. And then I think Phil Kearns said to him, made it 67% possession, and Nick White said thanks and walked off. So it was a pretty short interview. Channel 10s were better, mate, clearly, with your work on the sideline.
I don't know how you saw the Fox interview if you're watching Network 10.
Mate, I was at the game, remember? I said when I came home and I heard about it on Twitter.
Streaming. Yeah, well, why don't you come home and watch Channel 10? What are you doing, mate?
Well, that's where you think I got the screenshot of you with your mouth open, mate. Hey? Of course I watched it.
Okay, just checking.
Mate. Let's get into the Wallabies team for this week.
I always read your articles when you wrote for the Herald, so...
Yeah, thanks, mate. You're a prince. You're a prince among men, mate. Let's talk about the Wallabies for this week, and in the context for this too, I want to talk a little bit about Dave Rennie and the way he's gone through the first 3 games into his 4th. It's a new team, new coach, all of those kinds of things, but he has not been afraid to wield the knife, mate. And I think one of my questions here, Morgs, or one of my thoughts is, what are we seeing here from Dave Rennie? Are we seeing a guy who came in on a hiding to nothing in a COVID year and wanted to blood as many blokes as he could and do the best he could while getting a bit out of it, more than just thinking about, I've got to win these games? Because he certainly has shown a ruthlessness in taking guys out of the 23 entirely, not just out of the 15, but out of the 23. He has moved blokes in and out, and he's done it again this week. The Wallabies team for this week, we've got Tom Banks in at 15. We've got Tom Wright debuting on the wing. Paitea and Paisami in the middle there. Simone goes completely out. Korobidi stays on the wing there. So Daigunu's paid the price. Reece Hodge is a makeshift number 10 at best. So Lolesio goes back to the bench. Hodge has played a bit of 10, but let's be frank, he's not a 10. And I think you've said this before, mate. Nick White keeps his spot. Harry Wilson-Hooper. Lachlan Swinton comes straight into the 15, not the bench, straight into the 15 to bring a bit of grunt and muscle. I'm pleased to see that. I'm not entirely sure he's up to test standard yet, so he's got to show us that. Philip, Rob Simmons, Lukan Salakailoto, he got injured, went out. Alalatoa, Painga-Mosa and Slipper stay there. And on the bench as well, Angus Bell's going to get his go. Ned Hannigan goes back there. Liam Wright's back in. And Daiguinu stays in the 23. Morgs, how do you read the changes that Rennie has made? As I said, just he hacks away. He's not afraid to do it.
Well, mate, I'll tell you what, if I was in the Wallaby squad, it'd be like the Grim Reaper walking towards you on a Tuesday or a Wednesday when you're trying to work out what the team is. If the coach comes and shakes your hand or says hello to you, I'd be running the other way. You know, he can't fire you if he can't find you. I know what he's drinking up as on Halloween, that's for sure. That's a lot of changes. And look, he's justified in making changes by the performance that was put out on the weekend. But I think, you know, we've discussed a lot, and that often these sorts of changes are counterproductive, which means that if he's making these changes to blood guys and to give guys opportunities, and he's just sort of gone, well, the Bledisloe's over, maybe he's given up the Tri-Nations to a certain degree as well, and he just wants to blood guys and see what they've got. Tom Wright, happy to see that. You know, it's a guy that deserves an opportunity. Look, Reece, here's the truth about Reece Hodge. He's an excellent footballer, but of all the double-digit jerseys, 10's his worst position. He's a better centre, 12, 13. He's a better fullback. He is a fullback. And he's a better makeshift winger than he is a 10. Simple as that. He can kick and he can tackle and he's got a short passing game, but that's not all there is to being a 10. And he will, you know, he'll tackle well. He'll help it be a close game. Hopefully, he kicks first phase proactively. He's got a couple of steps to kick. It's not like he's used to kicking under pressure. So it'll be kicking early in the tackle count or kicking off a set position. It won't be, you know, a myriad of kicks in the middle of plays. And look, it's a different attacking setup to an O'Connor or a Noah Lolesio. With O'Connor out, I would have been tempted to stick with the kid, but maybe they want to give him the opportunity to just take a bit of pressure off and just enjoy the last 20 minutes and come on and have a crack. I can understand that. Simono, bang, gone straight away. Didn't see any injury announcement there. So these ones, and that was probably a 50-50 call last week. Do you pick Hunter and Paitea anyway? So we'll cop that one. Swinton's the interesting one. I went and watched the Aussie Invitational team play Argentina last week, and he was as close to best on ground as there is, really. He was excellent. So that's probably why he's in there. I know he's been abrasive at training and those sorts of things, and I think the quote was he goes at 100% when it's 60%. Well, some coaches hate that and some like it. So obviously Dave Rennie likes that. So he'll be
Rennie's definitely said, you know, form. He's talked about form on the training paddock as influences. He said Ned Hannigan. I think we talked about form on the training paddock. So if Swinton's doing that against the Argies, if he's ready to rip in, we certainly could do with a bit more muscle on the park, mate.
Yeah, well, you know, that's the thing. The results justify the changes. As I said, it's a waiting game to see if it's helpful or unhelpful.
Well, mate, I tell you what, it's certainly coming off a loss like that. Look, I suppose the good news is it's bright and sunny up in Brisbane. It's 28, 30 degrees each day, and it looks like it'll be a nice dry track for them. So that will make a difference. But I tell you what, that amount of change would have Ben Darwin, I think, rolling around with concern from his house down in Melbourne, because there's just too many guys there that really are stepping into unaccustomed roles or first roles, debutants. They're going to have to really step up. Mate, let's look at the All Blacks team they're facing, because there are plenty of changes there, as well as, debutants, as well as positional changes. Geordie Barrett back to 15, probably where he should have been. You know, as much as Mo'unga was fantastic last week, I actually think with Bowden at 10 and Geordie at 15, this side might be a little bit better than when they play Mo'unga at 10 and Geordie at 15. I know I'll get some kickings from some of our New Zealand fans because of that. But Geordie goes back to 15. Sevu Reece comes in on the wing. Anton Leonard-Brown stays at 13. Laumapi at 12. He's going to have to be running hard and straight for them, of course. Ioane in on the wing. Bowden at 10. TJ at 9. Artie comes back, which is a big lift for them as well. Sam Cane. Akira Ioane gets his start. We've talked about Akira Ioane before. I've loved his work in a Super Rugby. I've had chats with guys in New Zealand about how he hasn't quite cracked the All Blacks before. And there was a story about how he wanted to quit the game because he wasn't, I think, getting picked at that top level. And there was a belief that maybe he just didn't quite have the work rate. But he's here now, and I think he's an exceptionally good footballer. He'll be one to watch. Scott Barrett comes into the second row, which is not unsurprising with his previous record. And Cody Taylor steps in at hooker. A couple of guys on the bench for Asafa Amu has been on the fringe for a while. He looks like a great player. Cullen Grace is in there. Damien McKenzie's back, and Will Jordan gets his chance. Speaking of form, another player who was in excellent form in the Super Rugby season. Morgs, how do you see this All Black side who've made a number of changes, and any of those debutants you like the look of?
Well, it's a huge amount of changes for a Test football team. And the funny thing is that you look at the individuals brought in, they're just amazing footballers. And that's the conveyor belt of depth. If say, for example, last week, if it was Mo'unga and Goodhue that were injured, this is what we would have seen. A little bit different to what the Wallabies were forced to bring in terms of experience. Now they get a bit of breathing space and an opportunity with the Bledisloe sewn up and the first game of the Tri-Nations one to blood these guys. Now, what will happen here is there is disruption, so it won't be as well-oiled a machine as it normally is. But the quality of the individuals in there will be helpful. Akira Ioane, I think we've all waited to see him unleashed in Test football. I think I watched him play the French 15 just under a couple of years ago. And it's a guy ready for Test football, just needed to make sure his body was ready for it and go toe-to-toe with some of the great back rowers they've had over time. It's a patience game sometimes in New Zealand, waiting for your turn. There's quality players all across the park there. Excited to see Will Jordan get some game time as well. I think he'll get some solid minutes as well. Be good to see him out there. He was form outside back in Super Rugby. He was a brilliant player to watch and another exciting addition to that list of All Black players. This will be interesting in terms of the error rate and the quality of possession and footy that's played with the huge amount of changes that have been made by both sides. But that All Blacks team oozes quality and class and players that were in form in Super Rugby Aotearoa.
And that's one of the things that you can really see about the absolute strength of this All Blacks team is they uncover a bloke like Caleb Clark and then they give him a rest for a Bledisloe Cup game because they have got enough blokes that can come in. I mean, Australia uncovers a bloke like Caleb Clark, like our Jordan Patel. We want him on the park every single game, every chance we can get, but they're quite comfortable to rotate him out because they do have those types of guys coming in. Morgs, what do you think we'll see? Well, it's clearly going to be a different game because it'll be a dry track, but what do you think these two teams will try to do in this game? The Wallabies, of course, Reece Hodge as a player, very different, obviously, to Noah Lolesio, to James O'Connor, to Matt Tamua. It puts me in the frame of mind of, some of the conversations you and I have had over the last year or more that, Reece Hodge, James O'Connor, Matt Tamua, all three of those guys you've on this podcast said they're not genuine 10s or they're not actual 10s. They're better in other parts of the field. And it just goes to show that you talked about that gap that we've had in players coming through. We're filling another gap here, Morgs. What do you think will be different when we fill that gap with Reece Hodge?
Yeah, well, as we referenced, we chew up our 10s and we spit them out of our systems. Look, Hodge will be direct. The Wallabies will play direct. They'll have to. Where Swinton points to the same thing. That's a physical-looking back row. So I see them being exactly that. This is an opportunity for the Wallabies to just go straight and through and not try and go wide to wide. Originally, try and play it quite tight through the middle, 10 channel, see how we go there, try and play front foot ball. Dry track means, that there's opportunity to use the ball, but I can't see us going wide to wide with the cattle we have in 10-12, the ability to shift it. Remembering Paisami is a direct straight runner, not a long passing game. Hodge has got a good short passing game, not a long passing game. I think this could very much be direct, Wallabies direct, which sets us up well to defend. I think this will be a game about making it a tight game, and then if we need to, the cavalry can come on late. You see some of the firepower off the bench there. Noah Lolesio can have a really different role where if it's a tight game with 20 to go, he can come on and just have a crack without a ridiculous amount of pressure. So that will be interesting to see. Daugunu back to the bench. He should get some time late. So there's some game breakers on the bench.
Tupo.
And Taliolo there as well, obviously. So that'll be that'll be probably the way the Wallabies want to see it go, whether it comes off, whether there's enough deception and threats there to be able to go through the All Blacks remains to be seen. They've stiffened up their midfield with Laumape Barrett's an excellent defender, probably a better defender than Moanga. Perinara always performs well off the bench, and that back row is probably not a better back row than last week, but it's equal easily with Artie Sevilla there and the much awaited Akira Ioane.
But I'll call it. I think it is better. I think with Artie Sevilla in there, I think Akira Ioane brings almost as much as Satutu and Frizzell in a lot of ways. So I think the All Blacks have built into this series, and they're looking very strong. Morgs, look, the Wallabies need to show they're in this. Like, I don't think we expect them to win because of the way they've been going, the changes they've been making, what they've been having to deal with. But they need to show they're in this, don't they?
Yeah, they do. That's what we expect, a reaction. These sorts of games, the real blowout bad games, can be called aberrations if you bounce back straight away. We've talked about sort of less than 20 being the magic number if you want to beat the All Blacks. We need a much improved defensive effort. They need to score at least restricted to at least half the points they were able to score last week. And Hodge being there to stiffen up the defensive line, possibly play a bit more pragmatic football, play it down the other end, but also be very direct, very hard at inside shoulders, trying to flood through the middle of the All Blacks. That may be the way to do it to keep the game tight. And maybe it is a case of not wanting to get beat by 40, but wanting to lose by 7 to 10. And if we get that close, if the Wallabies get that close, then an opportunity to pull one out of the fire. That approach. And look, the more I look at it, the more I see a plan for the first 60 and a plan for the last 20 if the game's on the line.
Mate, a couple of things that I just want to see. I want to see Lockie Swinton stay on there. I don't want to see any yellow cards. He could see the red mist the way that he goes. He was lucky not to get a couple of cards late in the Waratahs season. And Reece Hodge, I hope he doesn't take too long to wind up with his kicks. I worry he might get charged down. He gets such a big boot onto it, but he does take a little bit to wind up. So I think they'll be trying to put some pressure on him, particularly if he's going to be getting those back three backs. And maybe with the size of the boot he's got, he'll force the All Blacks back three to give us a little bit more space around the park and see what we can do there. Morgs, let's go to our quick quarantine questions with Noah Lolesio. And as I said, I was really pleased that we spoke to this kid. I hope that we see a lot more of him in the Wallabies jersey. I'm pleased he's still in the 23 this week. I'm pleased he didn't go out the door with Simone because he is a talented kid. He's got a lot to offer, and he did step into one of the more difficult games of Test rugby that you will ever play in your career for his first up game. So no pressure on the kid. But, mate, you had a good chat to him. He's a good kid, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And he's a mercurial talent that just needs time and patience. Hopefully the day in, day out training at the Wallabies will help him get better and better. It wasn't the perfect debut he would have dreamed about, but there'll be many more Test matches for Noah Lolesio to play well.
Well, mate, let's have a listen to Noah now. And you, unsurprisingly, for regular listeners, Morgs is going to cover off for KFC again because, for some reason he's just got this KFC connection. Mate. He loves to talk KFC with the players. We need a KFC sponsor for the show. But after that, we'll come back and we'll talk briefly about the broadcast stuff because another story came out today saying that Fox Sports is no longer going to be the broadcaster of rugby union. It'll Nine Entertainment Australia, and that is massive news. So after you talk to Noah, we'll come back and have a quick chat about that.
Great to have Noah Lolesio jump on for a chat. Noah, thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Morgs. Pleasure to be here.
Mate, just have a quick chat about game day. What do you like on game day? You get a bit revved up throughout the day, or you're pretty chilled?
To be honest, I'm pretty sleepy, hey. Like, I always wake up just feeling like, the last thing I want to do is play when I wake up in the morning. I obviously go out to have brekkie and stuff, and then I come back and, have a nap probably midday, and then slowly work my way towards game day. And then once I hit warm-up, I'm ready to go. So, I'd say I'm pretty relaxed. Yeah, get very horizontal during game day, which is good.
What about, post-game, you get a day off away from the game? What do you like to do?
To be honest, every time I leave training or a game, I love to switch off. So I try and do everything as I can, when I'm at training or playing a game. And then when I get home, I just like to kick the feet up, watch some movies, play a bit of PlayStation, just to really get my mind off footy.
And then also a little bit like that, if you weren't playing rugby, what do you think your go-to sport would be?
Just rugby union?
Yeah, rugby. What else? What else have you got in the back pocket?
Well, Rugby league would obviously be a backup for me. Starting started playing rugby league as a kid and then growing up playing it. But other than that, I'd probably have to say basketball, mate.
Nice, good man. How's your jump shot?
Yeah, it's shocking.
We can work on that away from the game. And what about your favourite moment on the field? Where's the time that you pulled off a play right through playing the game that you thought, you know what, that was pretty good?
Yeah, I'd have to say it's my second game playing for Brumbies, how I flicked past it to Tom Banks. After that, I was like, did I really just do that? Like, I don't know how I pulled that off, but I managed to do it. So, yeah.
I'll tell you what I liked then is afterwards, I remember that play. You looked pretty cool as though you did it every day of the week as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, I wasn't really I just literally saw like a glimpse of him and just hoped for the best and just pulled off straight into his chest, so he made me look good.
And what about when the trainers or the coaches aren't around, you want to have a cheat day? What's a little food luxury you give yourself? What does you go to, mate? What do you got?
KFC, definitely. That Kentucky Fried Chicken is unreal.
But you a Zinger Burger man or a bit of original chicken, or what do you go?
Nah, Zinger Box. You got to go to Zinger Box with three extra wicked wings.
Yeah, nice. A little bit of heat with the wings. So, talk the Zinger Box. Is that got potato and gravy still?
Yes. So you can cool it off with that with your chips, and then if you want something spicy, you get the wicked wings and the burger. Oh, getting me hungry now during ice.
Well, the truth of the matter is, mate, I obviously know all of that. I'm a bit of a KFC fan, so I'm just trying to be a good interviewer.
Yeah.
What about growing up? Obviously, played league and union, but did you have a former Wallaby, a classic Wallaby that you liked watching growing up as a kid?
Yeah, especially in my position, it's definitely Quake Cooper, I reckon. Just the way he had that extra X factor and razzle dazzle, and just pulled something out of his pocket, which is always good to have. So he was probably my most exciting player to watch that play for the Wallabies when I was young.
Yeah, I think the great thing about Quade too is, especially I was lucky enough to play with him, that we saw all the showtime on game day, but what wasn't always seen, and maybe sometimes now people get to see with his social media, is how hard he worked.
Yeah.
The game day is the tip of the iceberg, and the hard work is a great example as well. So, mate, you couldn't have picked a better person to model your game on, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, he's one of a kind.
What about in terms of, we talked about mentors and guys you like watching. What's the best piece of rugby advice you've received?
Obviously, I've mentioned previously, going into my debut season, I felt like Christian Liliofano helped me a lot just getting into that 10 jersey. But it wasn't really rugby related. He just basically told me, however you go this season, just always just try and be the best version of yourself. So I've been sticking to that ever since, and it's got me here. So I'm going to try and keep doing that.
All right, there's a bit of a strange one to finish. Just, there's a huge injury problem in your team. We're going to have to throw you in the forwards. What kind of forward do you think you'd be? How would you go? What position would you be?
I'm probably the most unathletic person I know, so I'd have. You won't throw me in the front row. I'll get demolished. I'm too small to be in the lock. You got to put me 6 or 8, like a skillful back row. That's the way I see it.
That's it, mate. A bit of showtime coming around the corner, a couple of big shots, and strong over the ball, mate. That's perfect.
And just stand in wider channels. It's the life.
Noah Lolesio, thanks for spending some time with us, mate. That was great.
Cheers, Morgs, anytime.
Mate, I like that kid's energy. I've seen him interviewed on the sidelines a couple of times in games and around that, and he makes me feel old. He really seems like a kid, but he brings a great energy, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Actually, something just to keep between you and I, Ben. Obviously, with 10, we requested to talk to him after the game, and you do the coaches and the captains, and sometimes if you can, you try and grab a player. And obviously, we talked about it before the game, talking to the debutant at 10, and then we discussed whether we still wanted to do it, and that was the call that we did. And there was a little bit of hesitation in the Wallaby group, like, do you really want to talk to him? It hasn't been a brilliant debut, and eventually the media guys there, Marty's a brilliant operator, they had a chat with him, and he was keen to do it to front up and discuss the game. And it was live TV. We're crossing back and forth. We've got things going left, right, and centre, with 10 being a free-to-air channel. And he just came across, front up, and he said a couple of insightful and really aware things. So I think that really bodes well. I understand that the almost the idea to try and protect those players in that situation, but he said, I'm keen to talk and front up after that. So the little things like that, there's something that I'll remember, those little interactions, and have had a chat to him a few times. Talented kid, great kid, hard worker, the world of rugby at his feet, and I think he's got the right attitude to succeed.
Yeah, mate, that's good to see. And I tell you what, that's a nice little segue into what we wanted to just close out on, talking about the broadcast machinations that are going on at the moment. One of the things they're going to want to talk about and get right, with their new broadcaster is that access and those players, getting those players known, getting them out there and getting them. And so when you see a guy like Lolesio, when you see a guy like Harry Wilson, who are both very keen to speak and to be, front and centre being new Wallabies, I think that bodes really well. Now, mate, the news is it's being reported, though having written these kind of stories myself before, always got to be careful with the language, because the journalists will leave themselves outs if they haven't got it 100%. There was a story in the Australian today that said Channel 9 will be the next broadcaster. The headline said it, but the journalist doesn't write the headline. But in the story itself, there was a couple of caveats. There was a looking like, or there was a likely to. There was a little bit of an out in case they got it wrong. So it didn't look 100% like they had the story, but they had it enough to go. And what I'd suggest is that the story in the Australian came from the Fox Sports side. If they feel they're not going to trump the 9 bid, or if they feel they're gone, then obviously the Australians had a lot of lines coming out of News Limited, a lot of, from the senior echelons of News Limited around what's happening. They've had a lot of stories from that sort of perspective and not a lot from others. So it says to me that if the Australians writing that, the inference for me is that probably Foxtel and Fox Sports feel like the rugby is gone. The news probably hasn't come out of RA or 9 yet, but it probably feels like that. And Morgs, this would be quite a seismic move, wouldn't it? We're talking 25 years of a broadcaster relationship.
Yeah, it is the most significant relationship in the history of Australian rugby, and probably the greatest influence on the professional era that there's been, the relationship between the ARU then and the Rugby Australia now and Fox. And that doesn't go by the wayside if there's change. That they've been a huge contributor to the game. And I still, I don't know, Benny, will the great Patrick Delaney come in over the top late with a check last minute? Who
with
knows?
A big elbow.
Yeah, just something off the top rope,
He's a big unit.
Can you answer me a question first? Who writes the headlines?
The sub-editors. Right, so as a journo, you get told you got 800 words or you got a space to fill, or conversely, you tell them, "I got a great yarn, I need 1,000 words." If you've got a great yarn, you can tell them what you got. If they're just putting you in a hole, they'll tell you what you got. You got 400, 600, 800 words, or you go, "No, listen, I got a really good yarn, I need this," and then you might haggle back and forth with them. But you will write top to bottom, and sometimes, if you get a bit wordy, you'll file an extra 100, 200 words, and they'll have to cut it back. Or they'll decide you're only getting 700, not 800, and someone else will cut it back. So your story can actually end up remarkably different to some of the stuff that you filed. And, some of the push points in those newspapers sometimes is the fact that someone took something out that was critical, or you thought was critical, or you had to have in your story, and the whole story changes its shape. So it can be a bit like that, but the headlines are done by the person who puts the page together, be that online or be it in the newspaper. They will decide what to say. And so you'll often see people sort of, decrying what the headline says versus what was actually in the story, because the headline writer can get the big stick out and beat it up. That headline was quite definitive, but the story, as I said, was not as definitive.
Well, there's been a few times that I think even you, I've probably rung back in the day and gone, "Benny, mate, like the headline's like Ben Kimber is a pork chop," and it doesn't say anything. Or something, you know what I mean? Like,
thanks, mate. Yeah.
But when you're the subject of an article, the first one said, Stephen Hall is an idiot. He's terrible, and then it doesn't even mention the guy sometimes, or it's
absolutely that can happen.
The headline is this is 100% happening, and then in the article it's we've heard this might happen, but we're not sure. So I think the sub editor should have his name there, maybe headline written by something like that, because as a journalist, you put your name to the words, and Dad said any sportsman that has issue with an article, most of the issue is often with the headline, not representing what's in the article.
And to be honest, like I wrote for 11 years for the Herald, largely rugby, but some other stuff as well. But in that 11 years, I think I had one bloke come and tell me that I'd misquoted them, that I didn't trust that bloke anyway. Like I quoted him, mate. I had him on microphone. It was done. I had it recorded. So he was full of it. I won't name his name, but he was and still remains a senior figure.
I reckon I can guess that in one.
Yeah, but it was quite a senior figure in the Wallabies history who accused me of getting it wrong when I didn't. But generally, I remember having a conversation with Al Baxter in South Africa when he said, you press blokes blah, blah, blah. And I said, Big Al, you go and you find me any of my stories, you find anything wrong, you bring it straight to me and I'll put a correction in. I'm still waiting to hear Al, and Big Al's still involved with RA, so I'm still waiting to hear. But you're dead right. Often what can be construed is the headline changing a lot of stuff. But look, I want to make a point. I wrote about 1,700 words on the broadcast stuff in our newsletter a couple of weeks ago for our subscribers. And I've worked for Fox Sports. So, declare I was, an executive at Fox Sports. I was senior guy at Fairfax, senior guy at Nine. I've worked with all of these guys. And the thing that excites me about going to Nine, and Fox do a fantastic job with sport, right? You're not going to be a problem with Fox, but the opportunity of going to Nine for me that I don't think can be underplayed is never in Australian sport have we seen a paid proposition and a free-to-air proposition as one owner of a sport, as the single owner who can drive a product across both the free-to-air outcomes and the paid outcomes. Right now, you look at NRL or AFL. AFL gets massive grand final audiences. NRL gets massive state of origin audiences and grand final audiences. And that's an advertisement for the game in itself. But it's not an active advertisement for the game. You're not in there promoting the fact that you have a paid version of your product that would give you a deeper and better experience. Your big Channel 7 audiences don't say, by the way, there's all these great AFL shows that you could be watching if you paid and bought the product on Fox. So there's a real split between the way those two organisations manage it. If rugby ends up going as the first one, and look, they were first with pay TV back in the day. That's what Fox was built on. If they go as the first one into a Channel 9 Stan scenario where they can decide themselves how they move content across the two and how they promote content across the two, I think that's a very exciting opportunity for rugby, who needs to grow and who needs to showcase themselves. So if Nine does get it, I think there's a significant chance to do something different and good for Australian rugby.
Well, it sounds to me like you're sort of describing free previews.
Free previews? Yeah.
Sort of the theatrical trailer or the taste of the big stuff, and then pay-per-view.
Well, mate, the phrase I always use, but I never know if it's politically correct or not, is I say it's putting a leg outside the tent, right? It's a little leg outside the tent to show what's happening on the inside of the tent. But if anyone's upset with that, let me know. Morgs, anything to close off with, mate? I think that'll do us for the Tight 5 Live Rugby Ruckus /podcast scenario we've got going on today. We will have played this out live onto Facebook. I'll attempt to be on there and answer a few comments and questions out, Morgs. If you're around, I hope you can too. But anything to close with, Morgs?
No, we're just looking for that bounce back. I said, these performances by a Wallaby team can be aberrations as long as there's a significant bounce back straight away. And for the All Blacks, it's been great to watch them continually improve week in, week out. And it will be another excellent proposition if they can do that with the amount of changes they've made. So still some very interesting things to be seen this weekend.
Well, I'll be watching this one from a place up the coast with a barbecue and a glass of red wine and hoping to see the Wallabies win. Where are you going to be, bud?
I'll be at the RA headquarters with a group of people watching it in the clubhouse there. So we'll see how we go. Nice. The other thing is Mario Ledesma and Michael Cheika got their Pumas players all out of quarantine Tuesday. So they've been training hard for a couple of weeks. They've obviously got the Australian Invitational /A, whatever you want to call it, game on Saturday, I think, at Leichhardt Oval. So we'll turn our attention to the Pumas very soon as well. Excited to see, one, very thankful for the sacrifices they've made coming, but two, excited to see what they can put on the park.
Very good, mate. That was the Rugby Ruckus. We will catch you after Bledisloe 4, hoping for a different scenario than Bledisloe 3. Fingers crossed.